Well, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about recipes, traditional recipes, home recipes, maybe some of the cultural history or family history behind recipes, the social history behind, whatever you want to talk about. That's what we're going to be talking about. But before we do that, maybe we'll take just a minute and have you all introduce yourselves. Ethel, do you want to go first?
I'm Ethel Kipp. I live in Port Royal. I moved here about 40 years ago from Newfoundland.
All
So
right.
a lot of my recipes is Newfoundland based.
All right.
I'm Darlene Martell, and I live in Grand Row with my husband Donnie. And I moved here when I was 10 years old. My parents, my mother's from Shettycamp, and my father's from Little Ant, so we moved back here when I was 11 years old, and now I'm 65. So
You've been here a while.
I've been here for a little while.
Yeah. All right. Janice.
I'm Janice Touesnard from River Bourgeois. I've lived between St. Peter's and River Bourgeois my whole life. That's pretty much it, I guess.
All right. And Betsy.
I'm Betsy Balderston. We came back home to retire, and now we live in Lordways,
All right.
originally from Arishat.
And what about cooking? So you're all here because apparently you have some interest in cooking. Do you want to talk about that at all? When did you learn how to cook, Janice?
From my mother when I was young, because there was 8 of us in the family, so we had to help with cooking some of the time and
Right.
chores and stuff like that. So that I kind of got an interest in that. And of course, when I got married, I had to sink or swim. But it didn't always. I learned by either reading cookbooks, because I was on the internet and stuff back then, but and just trial and error. And like I say, my first batch of bread, the chickens wouldn't eat. It was pathetic, and yeah. But I always liked it, and of course we had 3 kids to feed, so you were always baking and cooking, and
Yeah.
and it was basically what we had, because we didn't have a lot when our kids were little. Meat and potatoes, fish and potatoes, vegetables you grew, which we still do, stuff like that. So it's all, pretty basic cook. I'd like to try different things, but yeah.
What about you, Betsy?
Well, I guess I started to learn from my father since my mother died when I was 3 years old. So by the time I was 12 or 13, he started to teach me how to cook. And then my 2 sisters, of course, they taught me a lot.
Right.
And then from there, like you say, it's the library, cookbooks. The Department of Agriculture for me was a great one because they gave out all these pamphlets. And so that's how I learned how to make pickles out of a book.
Where did they give these pamphlets out?
In Ontario, when I was living in Ontario.
Did they come in the mail?
No,
or-
you went to the Department of Agriculture, and I was so familiar to them, they would just say, go ahead in the back. And I would just take whatever I wanted, and I used those pamphlets for years.
Wow.
Years.
Wow.
Nice.
Never knew that existed, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
What
nice
were
spot.
What were you, Ethel, and cooking?
Well, I'm from a family of 16 children,
Oh.
and 13 were boys. And there was 3 of us sisters, so we learned to cook from our mother, of course, and to make bread and to do whatever needed to be done in the household for us all to survive.
So did the boys cook at all? It was just you?
The boys did not cook.
Uh-huh.
As the boys were old enough to do anything, they were outdoors doing gardening, growing vegetables. They helped Dad out at the sawmill, and they did all that kind of thing.
Okay.
Of course, it was, like Janice, lots of meat and potatoes and fish and brews and Jig's dinner and
Yeah.
with peas pudding in a bag,
Yes, yeah.
which was still one of my favorite things. And since then, I've started cooking many different things.
Yeah.
I love a variety, so I cook food from wherever I can hear of a recipe. I look it up and I figure it out and I
You
enjoy
cook
it.
it.
Yeah.
What about you, Darlene? Where'd you?
Well, for me, it's more my mother, my grandmothers, and my mother-in-law, and my sister-in-laws. So all of them put together, whenever I seen something I liked, then I'd say, okay, you got to teach me how to do that, you know. And like I said earlier, you know, the first time I made bread, boy, those rolls, they were thrown right at the crows. And you know, I was discussing with my husband and his friend, right? And I told my sister-in-law, I said, Trish, you got to teach me how to cook bread, you know. But like I said, you know, back then, you know, there was no measuring cups. I am a person of measuring cups and measuring spoons.
Right.
And so when she went, well, you're going to pour some of this? I'd say, okay, now you need to do something here. Give me that. And I put it into a, you know.
Some kind of measuring
Yeah,
device.
you know,
Yeah.
so it was all trial and error. But I love to cook, and my family knows it, and my kids know it. And I come from a family of only 4, and I'm the oldest one of the 4. And I was always the one that I would say, well, come on over, Christmas dinner, New Year's, whatever. I'd be the one that'd be running around the kitchen getting things done.
Anything's done. So you both like to cook. Do you guys still like to cook?
Oh, yes, yeah.
You don't like to cook as much, Betsy?
Don't like to cook now.
Yeah.
Too many great big meals that I've made over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were farming, that's what we did in Ontario. After the Christmas parade in the village, we always had a dinner for people, turkey dinner. The last year we did that, there was 55 people in our house, and I said, that's it. Who has enough dishes to feed 55 people?
Paper plates.
Yes.
No!
Back then there was no,
I didn't use paper plates, no.
real
Who
plates.
washed all
My
those
goodness.
dishes?
Took turns.
Whoever was sitting next to the sink and the dishwasher, I guess. Yeah, so no, I don't really enjoy cooking anymore.
Anymore, but you did it one time?
Yes,
Yeah.
younger and more energy.
So what do we love about cooking?
I love food.
Yeah, so do I, yeah.
I love good food.
Yeah.
And I love spices and flavors, and I like should I say this? A party in my mouth when I'm eating. And when I taste all the food, I want it to feel like, wow.
Okay, but
It's a
you didn't
party in my mouth.
But you didn't grow up that way, right? I mean,
No.
I remember, you know, I have family from Newfoundland, as you know, family from here, and I mean, the food was always good.
It was always
like I always
delicious.
enjoyed my grandmother's cooking, and you know, but I don't remember it being a party in my mouth.
I know. I mean, and it was fish and brews. It was baked beans. It was Jig's dinner with peas pudding and bread pudding.
Very staple foods.
I mean,
That
there
kind
wasn't
of
a
thing.
lot of desserts. There was, it was basic food, but I've traveled a bit.
A little bit, yeah.
And from that, I just think, oh gosh, there's so much good food out there. So whenever I have something somewhere else, I go back and say, oh yeah, I'm going to make this. And I'll Google it, and I'll think about the flavors, and I'll just do my own thing on it. Yeah.
Do you think that's a shift? I mean, you know, I'll tell you a story. I remember once being with my grandfathers in Newfoundland out at the beach, and I was telling him about eating mussels in Chicago and how fantastic they were. And he looked at me and he said, "What? You ate mussels?" I said, "Well, yeah." God, he said, they're not even worth bait. He was horrified at the idea, right? So I'm just wondering, like in our lifetime, I mean, do you think there's been a real switch in people's attitudes towards food?
Oh, I think there's been a big switch.
Yeah, from like what my grandmother and my mother did.
Yeah.
My mother didn't do some of the things that I would try to do. Plus, they never had, well, they had 8 kids. They didn't have people in their house like we do. We have dinner parties often at each other's houses, and we host a lot, you know, and that's different than what they did. They just didn't do that. And I enjoy cooking for other people. And like I said earlier, I'll try stuff, which maybe I shouldn't sometimes, new recipes on my friends. But they don't mind.
Yeah.
If someone else is cooking for them, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'm willing to try it, right? Yeah. And try new. But I am not good. Sometimes I have to phone my girlfriend and ask her, I'm making this, what else can I add to jazz it up? I'm not good at coming up with what spices go.
Right.
Well, she can just throw things in. So I say, you're a cook? She said, no, you're a cook too. I said, not like you. You know? Yeah.
That's what I do. I throw in.
Yeah.
Throw in, but I enjoy cooking, but I also enjoy watching them eat it.
Yes.
You know, to see what their
Yes.
their reaction's going to be.
Yeah,
Me
that
too.
that makes
Me
it all
too.
worthwhile.
And it makes a big
Hours.
difference, especially when they're
working.
raving about whatever I cook.
Yes,
Right?
yes,
And
for
that's
sure.
what I enjoy it. I enjoy it, and
Yeah.
I even enjoy it more when they enjoy it.
Yes, exactly. It makes it all worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're nodding your head, Betsy. You feel
Well,
it?
I agree. I find that food, like even from my childhood, was very plain.
Yeah.
Like you're saying.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
meat and potatoes. I mean, I didn't eat broccoli till I left Cape Breton.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a broccoli was. Okay,
Yeah.
asparagus was unheard of. You didn't put green things on your
Yeah.
plate unless it was peas that came out of a can.
Yeah.
It's true.
And so
Yeah.
yeah, but I find that food today is much more flavorful
Oh yes. Yeah.
and like you say, party in your mouth, right?
Yeah.
It's really good.
It's really
you
good.
can make so many different things.
Yeah.
I mean, my granddaughter, we had her one time, and we were in Halifax, and we were in Bears Lake or somewhere, and Donnie said to her, Blake, we're going to bring you to McDonald's. She said, no, Pepe, I want broccoli.
I want broccoli.
So I had to go to Walmart. It was right next to me. I went into the superstore there of that part, and I got the broccoli. We went home, and I steamed the broccoli, and that's what she had for lunch.
Wow.
Lovely.
2-year-old at that time. She's 3
wow.
now. 2
Yeah.
years.
She still eat broccoli?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
She does. She loves broccoli. So back then, you know, you didn't even know what a broccoli was, and nor did you eat it. You know, but
Yeah.
now the foods are different.
Yeah.
Things have
You got
changed.
Brussels
a lot.
sprouts
It's
at
not just
Christmas.
carrots, turnip,
Yeah.
potatoes
Yeah,
anymore.
well, and I think too, when I think back to my grandparents' generation, I mean, the world of consumer society was something that only emerged
Yeah.
after the war. Right?
Yeah.
So before then, I mean, people didn't buy their food at grocery stores.
That's right.
Much. I mean, they'd buy salt, they'd buy pepper, but everything else they grew themselves, right?
Yeah.
My grandmother's father did that, and my father always used to say, you know, they used to have their meat and their whatever's in their root cellar, and the people next door always had bread. So my grandmother would send my father down and get a chunk of meat or something and bring it to Mary, and Mary would send back bread or whatever that she was baking, a pie or whatever, right? And that's how they would do it, and you know.
Yeah.
So
So you didn't have access to certain ingredients.
that's
or
right.
that
No.
kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I wonder if that also, like again, I think about my grandfather's comment. I mean, they'd been eating mussels in France for hundreds of years. But I wonder if that limited people's imagination a little bit with respect to what could be done with food.
well, maybe because
know.
for them they use it, like you said, for bait or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or people who espouse a local diet. If you think about what that would have been here in 1890,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
there wouldn't have been a lot of variety, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like lobster is a delicacy for most people.
Yeah.
But back then, that was their staple. For a lobster fisherman,
Yeah.
fish,
Yeah.
you know, shellfish.
We talked about this at my last book club, how people were embarrassed to bring lobster sandwiches to school because that was poor people's food.
Yeah, exactly.
Now-
Yeah, and now
Yes.
it's
The complete opposite, right?
Yeah.
But who ate the first lobster? Who was brave enough to do that?
yeah,
No, seriously,
yeah,
though, when you think of it,
Yeah.
I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
But when you think of it, whoa,
yeah,
you know, and
Somebody
mussels
who
and
was really
oysters.
hungry.
yeah.
Yeah, someone who that's
Well,
someone
my-
was really hungry.
Yeah, my sister-in-law, her husband was a fisherman
Yeah.
because his father was a fisherman, and the license went down to him. So that's all they ever friggin' ate. That's
Yeah.
you know, lobster. Now you couldn't get a lobster passed through her. She just doesn't.
She won't eat it.
No, she said she's not fussy for it anymore.
So if you think back to some of those older recipes, are there ones that you still make? I know you make fish and brewis.
Well, we call it fish and brews
Fish and brews.
in Newfoundland.
In Newfoundland.
And
yeah.
I make it occasionally. Yeah, because it's soul food too, you know, but it's made with pork scrunchions, which is fried pork to a nice crispness, and made with drawn butter, which is made with onions and butter and flour and then water and make a nice sauce. And then, yeah, the brews is hard bread, usually made by Purity. And yeah, you just soak that overnight and bring it to a boil and have your potatoes and fish boiling in a pot and then take it out and smooth that all over the top, and it's
Delicious.
well, it's a party.
Yeah.
It's still a party. If it's done well, it's
But
delicious.
Newfoundlanders do have a knack for making that.
Yeah.
Oh, the fish and brews.
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah.
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 It's not a thing that you find cooked here.
Well,
No.
people do, but usually they're from Newfoundland. I've
Right.
had it, but it's,
You've had it.
she was from Newfoundland. Yeah, the woman who made it. Yeah.
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 So here, what's a dish that persists? I mean, aside from lobster, which everybody eats.
Meat pie.
Yes,
Meat
meat pie. Yes.
But it all depends on the type of meat pie. There's so many different kinds. You know, I have two different kinds. I have the Shetty Camp one, and I have the beef one. You know, the Shetty Camp one is pork and chicken.
Oh.
The one that I cook, because my mother and my mother-in-law, is beef. It's not hamburger one. It's the meat. And so, but we have friends. He's a Newfoundlander, and he likes hamburger, potatoes, all the vegetables and all that. And that's
shepherd's
that's
pie.
yeah,
Pretty much,
to
yes.
me.
No,
but
but
he
it-
but he
but
wants
it
it in a
is,
crust.
Yeah.
Well, if you go to Fleur de Lis, that's how they make theirs.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
See, and I grew up in
They
Quebec,
haven't
and
had
we
it
used to
there.
have tourtière, which
Yeah,
is all,
yeah.
which
Well,
is
that's
made
with-
that's,
yes.
that's Quebec.
Oh, you make that?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
rabbit pie.
Yeah.
a rabbit pie. So tell us about rabbit pie. That was a big
Well,
thing.
that's what I never had growing up. My mother always made meat pie with beef and
Yeah.
onions and
Yes.
spices and
Yeah.
stuff. But my husband's mother always made rabbit pie. When she made a
Yeah.
rabbit pie, she didn't debone it. It was the heads were in it.
Oh
It
my
was
God,
all
my
deboned,
goodness.
everything was close. So that was kind of it was delicious though, but
Yep.
it's just like I couldn't eat the head part of it. And picking all these bones off. So then when we had our own house and I started making it, I
Deboned it.
deboned the chicken,
But
the
that
ra-
takes
the
a
rabbit
long
and
time.
stuff. I
The
didn't
heads
use
out.
the heads.
Yeah.
I didn't use the heads, but now rabbits are pretty scarce.
Yes.
So I do put rabbit, pork, and
Yeah, you
beef,
mix it.
deer
Yeah.
meat, moose meat
Yeah.
if I can get it. I'll put it and mix
Yeah.
it all together
Yeah.
and do that.
Right.
But
And
there's-
that's the kind of meat
yeah.
pie that. And I have to say now I don't like just pure rabbit pie anymore myself.
Yeah.
I like the mixture of the meat.
Yeah, well,
better.
you're
I'll
used
eat
to it now,
but-
yeah.
Yes.
But there's a
Betsy, I
design.
think, has been trying
Sorry.
Oh, you were.
I have a memory sitting, you know, you go to midnight mass, and it was at midnight, and
Yeah.
after mass, you're like 8 years old, and you're really tired, and you want to go back to bed
You
because
want meat
Santa
pie.
Claus is coming.
Yeah.
And Dad would make this rabbit pie with all the bones in it.
Yes.
And I would sit there, and I was hungry, but all I could see, and to this day, is the little nose of the rabbit. I just
That'd be
can't
enough for
It
me.
was
eat
Thank
the
you
it.
very
eyes
much.
that would
I
get
can't.
me.
I can't eat it.
I
Yeah.
couldn't. I
It's
wouldn't.
okay if yours with the beef and the pork and
Yes, yes,
that's
I-
okay, but
Yeah.
just pure rabbit full of bones in between
Yeah.
two crusts, no,
No.
just no.
Well, that's so interesting that they left the bones in.
I don't know.
I
what-
Okay,
find
maybe it's
that
because
very
they were just too
interesting.
lazy to take it out, or
Didn't
they
have the
found it,
time,
or
maybe.
they didn't have the
That
time.
was just
Because
simpler.
did you ever try to debone a rabbit?
Yeah.
Because a rabbit has I don't
A lot
know
of
how
bones.
many bones there in
And
one
sharp.
little
Sharp bones.
Yeah.
too.
And
so
then
much
if it was
sinew,
shot-
like so much.
Yeah, and if it was
But
shot, then you had a whole bunch
ligaments.
of
Pellets.
Shells.
And, yeah.
I guess those went into the pie too.
you'd have to be very
Well,
careful, right?
It
Well, I had
did.
them in my mother-in-law's.
Well, usually
Yeah,
they
I
were
have a few
snared.
times I'd spit it out.
Usually
say,
they
"Oh,
were snared.
Yeah.
What was
though,
that?
weren't
Yeah.
they?
Snared,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they
Snared
Snared
just
rabbits
stink
are-
when you're. Oh, I used to make my father go on the back porch to take the hides off them.
I
'cause
know.
It just
Yeah,
couldn't stand the
absolutely
smell.
stinky. Yeah.
Stinky, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
but I love rabbit.
Now was rabbit
Yeah,
pie
when they're in a cage.
like a special occasion pie? Like,
It was
you know,
Christmas.
It was Christmas.
It was
And
Christmas,
meat,
yeah.
meat pie for the most part would be for us would be Christmas.
Christmas
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
You know, I'd make a whole pile, and then I'd pass it off to my father because at the end of my father wouldn't make it, so he'd get me the meat. He'd cut it all up. He'd stew it. There's a certain way of stewing it. You know, you just can't just stew it and
Yeah.
then throw it in. You know, so and you know he would say, okay, so I'm going to have that for Christmas Eve, right? And Christmas morning, and we had a Christmas morning and Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
My husband, when we'd go elsewhere for Christmas, he said, I miss my meat pie.
Aw.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's not,
So,
it's
you
not
know, either
Christmas
I'd have to take it with me or we wouldn't go. We'd
my
stay
own.
home and, you know,
Yeah,
travel
yeah.
later.
Yeah.
So what other traditional recipes do you remember from?
Baked beans. We had
Yes.
home a lot. Baked beans and
Yeah.
brown bread. My mother was a good bread baker.
Yeah.
Raisin
Yeah.
bread, brown bread, white bread.
Boston brown bread?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dad used
Yeah.
to make that.
Mm-hmm.
In the cans.
In
a
the
pot.
cans.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
chicken frico.
Oh, right.
So from Shedicamp.
Yeah, but it's also fairly big around here too.
It is, and they all have different ways of doing it.
So what are the different ways?
Well, for me, when my mother started doing it, and my grandmother was doing it in Shedicamp, every time I go see my mother and father, they stayed in Shedicamp for a while. Every Saturday night, they'd have chicken frico, and they go to O'Coin's Bakery and get rolls, and they put that in the oven so it'll be nice and crunchy. And it's just pork, onions, chicken with the bone in, and water.
Really?
And it's just the way you stew it all together.
That makes the flavor.
And green onions,
And green onions.
Okay.
Oh.
salted
Sounds-
green onions.
Salted green
I
onions.
make
That's
my
what
own
I-
salted green onions.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I do
So
that.
that's
Put
what
them
my
in
dad would
soups
do.
and stews.
Big
and,
bucket.
yeah.
I had never heard of salted green onions till I moved back.
Well,
here.
sives.
Me
Yeah,
too.
sides, yeah.
They're different, but we
Yeah.
just, the sives don't, you have to start them from another,
Well,
get
my,
them from
my,
somebody else, right?
yeah,
To-
my father would have all these sides, and he cut them all up, and then he put them in with rock salt in
Yeah.
a bucket, and just put layers
Yeah,
of
that's,
salt and of.
I do
and
the
then they-
mason jars.
That wasn't
my
a
root
Newfoundland
salad.
That's not a Newfoundland thing at all.
But
Yeah.
it's good. Urban always says,
Yeah,
did you
so
put
I
sives
always
in this?
Did
When
you,
I make a stew or
did
something.
you
What's it
use
called
those?
again?
Sives.
Sides.
Sides.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that, Betsy?
No.
No.
Is
okay.
that the size of the onion? What
You
is
could
that?
use, it's just a green onion.
Green onion.
You know,
tops,
the
the
tops,
tops of the
the
green
tops
onion.
of the
Top.
green,
Yeah, well, I used to buy them.
It's great with
Just
scapes.
chop
Yeah,
them up
we
and-
used everything. Yeah, we used everything. And,
Scapes would be really
yeah,
good.
and I just pop
but
that
not
in my
green
fridge,
onion.
and I have
Yeah,
it
green
there
onion that
all
we
the
use,
time.
that's what we do
So
now.
when my
is we
stews
don't
come
do the
out, or
starter
my
for the
soups or
scapes, so
whatever,
just green-
I take
Same
two big
thing.
helping
It's the salt, but it
tablespoons
tastes,
of that.
it's flavorful.
That's what I use scapes for.
Yeah,
But I don't salt them. I just freeze them.
yeah.
Cut them
Well,
up and freeze
yeah,
them.
because the sives is something that I've heard
Yes,
that since
yeah.
I've moved back
Yeah.
here, but I've never heard anybody else using them. That doesn't mean anything.
No, I
but-
still use them, yeah.
Yeah.
I got them in my fridge.
I had
The
them
bottom of
down-
my fridge, and
Yeah,
in
and
the
the
container.
extras are down in my root cellar. Yeah, yeah. There's something my mother used to make, you were saying, chicken frico. My mother used to make something called chicken fricassee.
Yeah.
I never got the recipe from her before she died. But one weekend we had a sister's weekend at my friend's cottage. So we made all things. I cooked all things Mum made. I was the cook. So I tried to replicate the chicken fricassee, and it didn't turn out bad actually.
Yeah.
But all it is just chicken pieces cut up, and you cook it with onions in oil.
Yeah.
You don't deep fry it. It's just a little bit, but you have to keep stirring it, stir it till it all browns, kind of caramelizes.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh,
But that's
okay.
pretty well what
And that's
you
one of
do with a
Mom's-
chicken frico.
Yeah. Yeah.
So were there any vegetables
You
added
cook
to it?
No, you just eat it with vegetables and potatoes. And
Okay.
This was just the chicken and the onions, and you just keep stirring it around and browning it till it kind of caramelizes. And that was one of, and I don't know where Mom, you wish you would go back now and
Yeah, and ask
say,
those.
sit down with her and take her
Yeah.
or ask her these things. And
Yeah, where
just
did that
can't
come
anymore
from? Yeah.
because they were our comfort foods. And the same with this thing she used to make. We used to call it lello pudding when we were kids. That's what we called it. And all it was lemon pie filling with meringue whipped in it, and you just mix it together gently, like you would to mix it. And we always had that on Sunday nights watching a certain program. And
so
it's when you make that, it takes you right back to that childhood
Yep.
memories.
Yeah, mine.
The same with
Yep,
the chicken
same thing.
fricassee. It was
Yep,
like,
that's
oh,
right.
this is Mom.
What takes you back, Betsy?
Well, as you were speaking about frico, what my family did was you got green beans, yellow beans, peas, onions, garden carrots, whatever is ready at that time.
Yeah.
And everything was just layered, so rinsed
Okay.
and then layered,
Yeah.
and then salt and pepper on each layer. Lid goes on, and they're steamed in that. And broad beans, of course. And that was it. There was no meat in it.
No meat.
Now in
like a
Lord
garden.
ways,
So like a garden stew.
in Lord ways,
Without
that's
meat.
exactly
Yes,
it.
yeah.
It's like thick soup.
And that
It-
would be a main meal? Or
That was your meal with some bread. Yep.
with some bread?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was your meal. Frickle. I still make it, but now
Yeah.
it's a pot this big.
And for you, Ethel, like, was there something in particular that
Well,
takes you back?
jelly, whenever I see jelly, jello. So jelly and custard was a thing we used to make for every Sunday. For every Sunday, we would eat jelly for our main, for our evening meal. Would be jelly and custard.
Oh, really?
But at the time we didn't have refrigerators
Right.
because we were backwoods of Newfoundland with no electricity. So we had a house that was built over a spring, and there'd be shelving in the
Oh.
spring, and there'd be buckets that you would put your food in and put something on top of them to keep them in the cold water. So we used to make jelly and
So-
take it down to the spring to
By
to
jelly,
set.
you mean Jello?
Jello, but we called it jelly.
Jelly. Okay.
And then it was bird's eye custard.
Oh,
made
right.
with milk and vanilla sugar.
Yes, yeah.
Vanilla and sugar. Yeah.
Very good.
So, it was quite tasty at the time. I don't make it now.
No.
But if I see jelly, I
think of that.
automatically
It brings
go
you back
to
to-
the
Yeah.
spring and getting the jelly down there. And one time a bear tore apart the spring and
Yeah.
got in and ate the food. So we were pretty sour about
Yeah,
that
I
I
bear.
imagine you would be. Yeah.
But these are not things we tend to make as much anymore.
Oh,
No,
gosh,
that's right.
No,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I don't know when
Yeah.
I made jelly last.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So what occasions now do you make things? Is it just when you're feeling homesick, or do you make it only for sentimental reasons, or do you?
Well, there's a dessert my mother used to make that was called lemon surprise, which is just whipped carnation milk and Jello pudding is in it, and grain wafer crumbs. And my little sister, who's at the home in Louisdale, the group home, that's what she wants all the time. So we make that for her because something Mom always made for her, and so that brings her close to,
Yeah,
reminds her of home.
yeah, and who she is.
Fun.
And who she is, yeah,
Who she is,
yeah,
yeah.
and that's what she, So that's another dessert that
Yeah.
brings us back to Mom.
Well, there was that weird point in history. I mean, I remember, my mom got into, like, all our mums got into the stuff that was always all prepackaged and all processed, right? Like, it was a thing. I mean, I remember my mother, she used to make this chowder. I mean, my mother made a fabulous chowder from scratch, but then somebody gave her a recipe for one that you make with different kinds of Campbell soup, right?
Oh.
And
I
I remember
know.
the time being a bit puzzled by that, right? But it was kind of a modern thing to do. Like, this would have
Yes.
been in the early 60s, and so, like, it was...
Because they were probably tired of making everything from scratch.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know. But all these, very processed things came.
Yes,
I think
and
convenience also.
Convenience
was
is the word, yeah. I
And
guess
faster.
faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, which in your house with 16 kids would have been a lot.
Yeah.
Well,
Really?
yeah, my parents didn't put much aside other than berries for jams, made jams and jellies. And other than that, I mean, there was a moose every year. So we didn't, some people bottled it in the community. We didn't have time to be bottling moose. We had
You're
18
eating
of
it.
us to feed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was in a
Yeah.
in a freezer when we had freezers.
Yes, yeah.
And there was no time for anything except get the food on the table, get cleaned up, think about the next meal.
Yeah.
I think
always,
about
always
feed.
bread.
Yes,
Always
yeah, it
bread.
was a staple, yeah.
I'm
I
almost,
still make jellies. I haven't bought a jar of jam in 45 years.
oh,
I
same
only
thing
make
with
my
me.
own.
I make my own.
Yeah, I haven't bought, yeah.
I gave that
My
up
husband
years
picks the
ago.
berries
Oh,
and I
did ya?
make the jam.
Oh yeah, I don't
Yeah.
make jam anymore. I buy it at markets.
Yeah. Well,
I have a
it's
certain
yeah.
person I buy
Yeah.
it from.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
it's very labor intensive.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
good.
homemade raspberry jam is
Summer.
the
It's summer.
absolute
Yeah.
best. It's so flavorful, like there's no comparison.
That's what my
Yeah.
daughter
You know?
likes.
Yeah.
My daughter-in-law likes raspberry. She likes strawberry, but
Raspberry.
one of them
is my
likes
favorite.
one of the ones she's the lover for raspberries.
Yeah.
I've yet to make it yet for her, but eventually I'll come across.
But that is a tradition that has persisted, right?
Yeah.
Is
Yes,
preserved.
yes.
Preserved,
Oh,
yeah.
yes. I make
Pickles.
mustard
Pickles
pickles and
Yeah.
Yeah.
beets, pickled beets. I can't make bread and butter pickles for some reason. They just don't turn out for me.
Yeah.
So my friend makes them for me, and yeah.
Yeah.
My mother never made beets either in pickles
Yeah.
because we had a root cellar and we would make the beets the day we were making a boiled dinner or Jig's dinner. We would boil the beets, cut them up,
That's what you
put
would
sugar
have.
on the top, poured vinegar over the top, and that was beets. And they were always delicious. You had them at my
I
place
did.
recently.
Yeah, they were very good. Yeah, I can never say no to a beet.
Yeah, but one of the traditions at my place was Christmas Eve with fruit cakes.
Oh
Now,
yes,
I still make fruit cakes.
Yeah, I do.
Now
too.
mine are gluten free, which is very different.
Mm-hmm.
Mixed fruit cakes at Christmas, and I've seen 12 fruit cakes in the pantry. you know, and decorated with pink and green frosting. She never ever cut back on that.
No.
We had no money, but she had those cakes decorated, and they
Yeah.
were so good, and they meant so much to us on Christmas
Yeah.
Eve.
Yeah.
And then we had the purity syrup,
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
syrup in water,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that was our drink on Christmas Eve. So that was it was. You know, it tasted quite good. I don't put any frosting on mine. I
don't
wrap it in
either.
a cheesecloth filled with rum or brandy.
That's what I do too,
And
yeah.
that's why I keep my fruit
Me
cakes.
too, yeah.
And do people still do the plum puddings? My mother
Oh,
was.
my
My
mother
mother-in-law
always
did.
did.
She used to do them in the apple juice cans,
Yes.
and she'd do them in there. Yeah.
Mom had a can that had all these nice little designs in it. And
Oh,
she
right.
always did hers in that
Oh, okay.
for
Yes.
Christmas, and then she'd make a nice sauce to go over the
Yes,
top.
yeah.
Brown
I haven't
sugar
made that in
sauce. That
years,
was
yeah.
so good.
Our family would be tweed squares.
Oh.
And I'll tell you, there was only like a few in the family. The sister-in-laws would be the ones that would make the tweed squares. And of course, Christmas time, up until when I showed up in this family, we would have all of them over at our place for Christmas dinner. So, of course, the tweed squares would come in. So there was Teresa's tweed squares and Duck's tweed squares and Delia's tweed squares. So everybody would be competing to see, you know, like who's the best. Who's the best. And all the boys and all the young girls, boy, they were going after them and saying, is that Tot Delia's tweed squares, or is that Mom's tweed squares, or is that Tot Teresa's tweed squares?
I love it.
And so they, and to this day, if you leave a pan of tweed squares in the middle of a room somewhere, you can be sure that it's going to be missing. My husband turned around not too long ago, walked into the house and got my son on the outside and passed it through him through the window and put it in the car. And everybody was looking around for the tweed squares they couldn't understand. And when I got in the car, what was sitting in the back seat? The pan of tweed squares. So they went and brought it back later on after we all ate the one tweed square, brought it back in the house, sat it back on the table, never said a word and walked out. So they're crazy for tweed squares, right? So just recently, my sister-in-law died, the one that really is the best tweed square one.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to figure out a way, you know, just go after her recipe. She had told me it one day, and so this day I decided to do it. And then I brought it to her husband, Carl, and I said, try them out, you know. He said, well, I can tell you one thing. He said, the cake is a little bit too thick.
Well, he was being honest.
I said, okay, thank you. I said,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
try the rest, would you?
Yeah.
So,
Sure didn't go to waste.
so I didn't hear from him since. So I don't know. I keep on saying, did you try it? He said, well, I think I'm going on a diet.
Oh!
So I don't know if he doesn't want to tell me, but my husband and my son and the other one was in Halifax, so he didn't taste it, but they all said that they loved it, and it was probably the best that they have tasted. But I mean,
that's a fun story, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, you know, there's the tweed squares themselves
Yep.
and a tradition, but I mean, it also speaks to the love, right,
Yep.
behind
Yes.
cooking.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So to
Yep.
bring that to Carl,
Yeah.
and also the competition, right, behind
Yeah.
cooking.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Oh,
my gosh.
God.
yeah.
My
Oh, my
grandmother had recipes. She'd say, "Well, I'll write this down, but you can't give it to anybody."
Oh,
It's like I lived in Chicago at the time. I think, well, okay.
who am I going to tell?
Who am I
Who am I
gonna
going to
give
give
it
it
to?
to? Yeah.
But did you have that in your family, like competition about? Did you have
No, I don't.
competitive cooks?
Well, we didn't have competitive cooks, I don't
I mean,
think.
playfully
I think we're
competitive.
more
Playfully,
competitive now.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
When we go out to a dinner party and, you know, somebody brought this and somebody brought that, and you're like, oh, did that get eaten? Did that get eaten?
Yes, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Or,
What
yeah.
was that? Yeah.
Yeah. So is that a competition of love? I wonder.
I
or
think so. There's friendly,
Yeah.
there's love and banter going on.
Yeah.
You know, because every time this family gets together, the first thing they're looking for. No tweet squares.
Yeah.
But 9 times out of 10, it's probably hidden somewhere. It's because somebody only brought a
Somebody's-
small one,
And-
and if Donnie or Mitch or
They'd
Tommy would
disappear.
get a hold of them, boy, they'd be missing.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But none of you stuck to your grandmother's recipe books or grandfather's.
I know,
Oh,
I know.
you did
My-
stick to your grandmother's recipe books?
I still make her fruitcake. I have her bread and butter pickles, mustard. Well, beets are pretty brainless, but
Yeah.
pickled beets are pretty brainless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do use a lot of her recipes, and I probably sold 300 jars of pickles last year.
Holy
wow.
smokes!
Yeah.
Yeah,
I couldn't
So
keep up. I
there's
haven't
still
done that.
there's still a demand for a lot of
Yeah,
Yes,
oh,
there
yeah.
is.
Yes,
Well,
yeah,
the
there is.
But they're
You
my
go to the
great grandmother's
markets.
recipes, and
Yes.
because she didn't have to work with what I have to work with, like those jars and things like that.
Yes,
I
yeah.
cut back the sugar and everything
yeah,
by a lot.
Yeah.
yeah,
No need for it.
right.
Yeah.
Whereas she needed it to keep it for
keep
the
it-
winter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
those were handed down through my grandmother, my
Yeah.
mother and father, and my sisters, and
And those were all ways of preserving food, right? And then you get
Well,
a
yes.
taste for them just as a pickle. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
we don't do pickles now because we're worried about preserving various vegetables
No.
out of our garden.
just that they're
we do them
better.
because we like them.
You like the flavor
exactly,
better, like
that's right.
homemade mustard
It's-
pickles are
and
so
I
much
mean,
better
it's
than
not-
Habitat.
It's not
I've
like
never
it's cheaper.
tasted Habitat.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
Habitat
Do
because
you?
I don't make any.
Oh, okay.
You'll
You
have
have
to come
taste
see me
buds.
at the market.
I will. But I have to have mustard pickles with my boiled dinner, and this
Yes.
past
Yes.
week, I couldn't find them anywhere.
Aw.
Yeah.
My root cellar, Ethel, anytime.
Well,
I had a jar.
anytime. She had
Root cellar.
Anne had a jar at
I had a
home,
jar
and I
of
forgot. I
Yeah.
didn't think to ask
It was
Anne
given
if
to
she
me
had
by
it.
my cousin Olive.
Yeah.
My first cousin.
But
was
a lot of
Romanian.
times, mustard pickles are made with a little bit of flour in them.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, mine.
And
are.
I
You
can't-
you probably
I
do
can't
cornstarch.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could do it with cornstarch.
What do
Try a
you
little
do
batch.
yours with, Betsy?
Flour.
Flour,
See,
yeah,
I
because
wouldn't
that was
be able
the.
to buy
I
yours.
have used
But you could
cornstarch.
probably do it with
Yeah.
cornstarch.
Cornstarch
I mean,
is a
chefs use
thickening.
cornstarch.
Well, it's certainly
It works just fine.
Yeah.
wouldn't be any much
I mean,
difference.
I
No, I
use
don't think so.
cornstarch in my gravy instead of flour because I like shiny gravy. I don't like dull gravy.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
So I use cornstarch.
No,
Right,
I use flour, but all my others, the in-laws, they all do.
Cornstarch.
Yeah, I just like the look of shiny gravy, so that's what I use.
I think cornstarch is easier because
Oh, it is.
you don't get the lumps you get with
Yeah.
flour.
Well,
I think that's
depends.
why some people.
I got
More
a container and I
control.
bang that thing to the cupboard and everything else to make sure everything's loose.
Yeah.
I think it may be just what you're used to, what you grew up with, right?
Yeah.
And cooking traditions. So around here, flour was readily available, whereas
Yes, I
cornstarch
guess so.
was
yeah.
a bit
Yeah.
exotic,
Yeah.
right? So-
Yes, yeah.
True.
When you were just talking about childhood memories and stuff, my brother asked us one time on a family chat, I made Mom's white fish sauce and it doesn't taste like Mom's. What am I doing wrong?
Right.
And I said, did you use carnation milk? He goes, no, I use blend cream. And I said, try with
There you go.
carnation milk. So he did that the next time. He goes, oh my God, you were right. That's the taste I was missing.
Yeah.
White sauce.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
because she always made it with white sauce. She didn't buy cream. Cream was expensive. So
Right.
she used carnation milk. And
But that's
the-
interesting too, right? Like there are some people, like in many cases, siblings
Yep.
are the only people left on the planet who have a memory
Yes.
of,
That's right.
of what something tasted like. And what that means is they also have a memory of all the occasions on which those were.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
and
served,
that
you know.
is the tie that binds you together as a family.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a different
Those-
relationship.
those
It's-
things,
It's
yeah.
a unique relationship,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
you might have it with cousins, but
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but my husband turns around and there's a certain cookie that his sister used to make, and she was deaf, and she was living in Ontario. But every time she'd come home, she'd make this certain cookie, and it was probably oatmeal and a jam in it and everything else. And every time that he would try some recipe, because he wouldn't be scared to go and try it himself, there's something missing, he'd say. And then his sisters would say, well, try this or try that. And still, he hasn't been able to get that
He hasn't
right.
perfected it.
No, not yet. So he's hoping that Catherine's recipe will pop into his head somewhere, or somebody will say, did you try this? Or,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah.
still misses in that, and he always thinks about that when she would come home and she'd cook, and these were certain things that she would cook, and he really liked it when he was growing up.
So there are recipes that we're attached to because
Oh yeah.
they bring us to a place where we used to be, and they keep that place alive.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but do you remember the first time you cooked something that was really out there in your mind? You know, like my mother wouldn't have cooked. Like nobody I know would have cooked this. Like it
Yes.
felt like an adventure. It was like. I mean, for me,
pot
it
of
was
soup
pad
for me.
thai. It was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I need pad thai.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to buy it on Isle Madame. But people obviously know how to cook pad thai, so
Yeah.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah. For me, it was soup.
Soup.
Yeah.
Any kind of soup, or-
Well, now Donnie tells me in 20 minutes, like 40 minutes, I'll have a pot of soup ready, and it'll taste perfect, right? But after a while of me tasting, I'd have to say, okay, I'm done, but you need to taste it because my taste buds are gone now because I've been tasting and tasting, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I'll try just about any soup, but my father was like that. He would do that, so.
So he was an adventuresome.
Oh, my father. Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, he'd try anything, whatever was in the kitchen. It went in there, and it tasted good. You know.
Clean
So.
out your fridge soup.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Favorite soup, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but do you
done that.
remember cooking something for, I don't know, the
Paella.
paella?
I made paella one time, and
That's adventurous.
I had it in Portugal
I
or
had
Spain. I think Spain. I had it in
yeah.
Spain, and I thought, you know what? I really would like to try this, and I did, and I was blown away by the flavors. I was so excited about it. Yeah, but it's not something I continue to make. Of course, it requires lots of fresh fish, and not that we can't get it here, but you know,
No, but it
just
all
to
has to
get
happen at the
all
same
the
time,
ingredients
yeah.
together at
And
the right
saffron,
time.
you can't always get that good
Well, I've got
saffron.
saffron in my cupboard, but yeah, that
a
was
big-
one of my big things. And risotto, I made risotto,
Oh, yeah,
and I absolutely love it.
yeah.
What
That's
about you,
an
Betsy? Do you ever go out on a
I
limb?
like 'em.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
Do you remember like a time that you went out on a limb when you thought you were really out on a limb?
I made Moroccan food.
Oh, okay.
It was absolutely delicious. It was first attempt, lots of Google, lots of cookbooks, but I got it done and it was really, really good. Except the next night, there was enough for leftovers. The next night, it was so hot, I ate craft dinner. It was
too
couldn't eat
spicy.
It
Yeah.
was, those spices had just
Yeah,
exploded.
exploded.
So the
That's what
notion of
happens.
so
yeah.
the notion that says the next day it's better.
No,
This
Sometimes
one was
not
much
always.
hotter. Yeah.
But that is true of soups and stews.
Yeah.
though.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
soups
Because
and
I
stews,
did
yeah.
make my curries the night before
Right,
for
and
that
I
night for the next night, and
That's a good
the
idea.
flavors
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
were
explode.
certainly a lot better the
Yeah.
next day.
yeah, I find
But
curries,
curries don't have to be hot.
No,
this was
I've had
hot.
hot ones,
but they need to be very flavorful.
but
with a lot
the
of,
flavors what you're looking for, and that's where all those spices and
So you must have gone out on a limb at some point to get yourself into making different curries.
oh, and I
She
just
has.
did that last month. Stuff with the curries.
Oh, that's a
actually.
recent limb.
That's
Okay.
just a recent limb that I said, okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna try do this from scratch. The first curry I ever had, I thought we were eating beef, but it was chicken. It's because of all the spices in it.
right,
Mm.
right.
Yeah. I don't know what's the first adventurous thing I made after I was married. It was a lot of years because all we had was carrots, turnip, potatoes, meat, or fish.
Exactly.
So we ate for years. We, we had our own beef animals and we grew our own
Yeah.
vegetables and had our own chickens and stuff. So you just,
Well, I'm always
what you
curious
cook.
as to when people sort of strike out, in a new direction,
mm-hmm.
and what leads you to do that.
Well, Martha led me to curries. Martha Nettleton.
Martha Nettleton.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one that led me. And lentil curry is one of my favorites, and she taught me how to make that.
Mm-hmm.
And we had
And that comes from her connection
that comes from her
from
connection.
Britain, right? So
Yeah.
growing up in Scotland,
Yeah,
and the connection of England with the Raj,
Yeah.
yeah.
as they used to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
curries were a thing.
I went to we used to entertain Cody Institute people. The students they'd come in and we'd go up and we'd be there for their arrival and we'd meet a few of them and then we'd say, okay, come on down for a weekend. So we'd house them in my place and Martha's place and Jack and Peggy's place. And so we were doing an evening of food, of course, and I was going to make the lentil curry. And there was 3 Indian men standing in the kitchen watching me.
Yeah.
And he said, I've got cilantro roots, let's say, because I put cilantro roots in mine. So I took the cilantro roots, I cleaned them all up really well, and I chopped them all up, and I put it in there, and I had some chili peppers, and, ginger and garlic, and cilantro stems and as well. And the guys were looking at me, and they were like, we don't do curry like that. I said, well, please, I
Yeah.
would love to know your traditional way of
Yes,
making
yeah.
curry. Why don't you do it?
Yeah.
He said, no, you do it. This is looking good. It's smelling good. You do it. And anyway, the dinner of curry, they said, you can come to India and make curry
Aw.
for us any day.
Anytime.
There you go.
But did they ever tell you what they do?
No, they
No.
never shared that. No.
Well, travel certainly has changed people's tastes.
Oh
right?
my goodness.
I mean, like my
yes.
grandparents' generation, you know, I mean, plane fares were an extraordinary amount of money.
Yes,
People didn't
it's
have
true.
pensions, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
so the luxury of travel, travel was not as accessible. Certainly in the 70s, you know, travel began to explode. So people tasted things in different places, and then we
Exactly.
came home, wanted to cook them.
Wanted
Yeah.
to cook it,
Wanted
yeah.
to have that flavor again.
Yeah.
And then you know, you meet people. As cities became more cosmopolitan, then ingredients were more available.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah, because until there's a population that demands cilantro,
exactly.
you're not going to
you're not
find it in
gonna
a
find it.
grocery
Yeah,
store.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true, yeah. You can get
Start
a lot
growing
more
it.
stuff now. I
Yeah,
very
now.
seldom go to Port Hawkesbury, but my daughter-in-law was telling me when I was doing the Indian cooking that Superstore has a very wide
Yeah.
range now
Yeah.
of spices for doing Indian cooking where they never had before, but it's because there's so many ingredients.
Yeah, and people
Yeah,
are.
and
people
so
are
there's a
asking
need,
for
there's
it.
a necessity
Yeah,
to
people
have
are
it. People are
exploring.
asking for it, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've come a long way for sure.
Yeah.
Superstore.
Yeah, so it's kind of nice that we've moved beyond meat and fish and potatoes, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to cook now?
Curry. Lentil curry is my favorite. It's always been. Any curry. Chickpea vegetable curry.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to make a squash chickpea curry tonight, I think.
Okay, I'll be there.
Yeah.
We're all coming over.
We know where you live, Ethel,
I
remember?
know. I should say that. loud.
Yeah, yeah.
What about you, Darlene? What do you like to cook now?
I like to cook, you know, anything, and it's just Donnie and I now, so, you know, anything that I have a whim to do, you know, whatever's in the cupboard, I'll just throw something together, and if it's some kind of Chinese food, a stir fry, you know, if I go down and get some gray sole out and do that, and, you know, so it all depends. There's nothing specific, you know.
Just sounds like you like variety.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like variety, but I'm not adventurous. I'm not like Ethel here. I'm not adventurous. Yeah, I just can't see myself doing that. But I mean, you know.
Well, it sounds like you got a fairly wide
Oh yeah.
selection of things.
yeah.
What about you, Janice?
I'm more adventurous when I have people coming over to try new stuff, to try it on
Well,
them.
it's often an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
It is,
to
yeah.
do
But
that,
I
yeah.
still like a good beef stew is like,
Oh yeah.
it's comfort and it's,
Yes.
yeah, you know, or a pot roast.
Yeah.
That's, I find those are just
Yeah.
staple comfort
I
stuff.
had a friend who traveled for about 6 months, a couple of years ago before the pandemic, and I remember when she got home, one of the things she's a cook. Anyway, she said, "I'm just looking forward to bacon."
Oh, bacon. Oh, bacon.
Not
bacon.
bacon,
Yeah, yeah.
bacon. I just
Okay,
want to
yeah.
eat some bacon. What about you, Betsy? Do you?
Well, I think probably the favorite things that I make are like I make turkey fricassee,
Okay.
and I just get the thighs or the legs or whatever. And basically, it's a turkey stew,
Yeah.
but lots of herbs and garlic and things like that, onions, blah blah. Blah. And basically anything in a big pot. I love making a big pot of bone stock.
Right.
Like I'll do that twice a year, save my bones, any little ends of roast beef, the little hard end of the Parmesan cheese.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, yeah,
and
that's
in there, yeah.
Yeah.
And so when I think I have my stock pot, I can fill it with bones. I put that on the stove with things in it, and I simmer that for 8 hours. Then I, cool it, take the fat off, all of those things, and I freeze it in zip bags so that there's just enough for the both of us.
Yeah.
I don't do the vegetables in it. I just do that as I want them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anything in a big pot, really, I really
Yeah.
enjoy making.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just discovered. Well, I discovered the Dutch oven, and I think I've died and gone to heaven.
It's hard to
What can you not cook in a Dutch
Yeah,
oven?
and-
Yeah,
Exactly,
I know,
yeah.
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 I got a couple of different sizes.
Hard to
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
that hardcore yet.
And, well, it's not that hardcore. I inherited all of them, so they're in my cupboard.
They're in your cupboard, yeah. We make our own chicken broth too because we have our own chickens.
Okay.
So whatever's left over when we cut the ones up to do chicken parts, the ones we don't leave together, we boil it all down.
Yeah,
And-
the backs.
yeah. And then our kids do some of it too, but they always throw the leftover chicken. But Irvin and I picked up every little bit of chicken
Ah,
and put that in Ziploc bags too. So now when I make chicken soup,
Yeah,
the stock is there and the meat is there, and it's just add some vegetables and
Yeah.
it's done.
it's
Yeah.
done. Yes, I
You
love
know?
it. Yeah,
And there's no waste. Like,
yeah.
yeah,
yeah. Like 2 stocks a year will do us a soup for a whole year.
yeah.
Huh.
So that one, and I never top it up
Right.
ever. I don't top up that stock.
Right. So it's nice and,
And our son says,
concentrated.
"Don't
Yeah.
stir it."
Don't stir.
Makes it cloudy. And then Jerry and I, my brother Jerry and I, always had this little competition. Who can get the most jelly
Oh,
out
right.
of their stock, right?
Right.
And he'd go, "Look." God bless him. And then he'd see mine and he'd go, "How did you do that?"
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
He
So
was a good cook.
if you're going to give advice to people, I think a lot of people discovered cooking during the pandemic. I mean, and we live in a rural area where you can't go out for pad time
Yeah.
whenever you want it. But a lot of people in urban areas, friends of mine and my kids and their friends,
Yeah.
discovered that they kind of liked to cook
Yeah.
and had fun cooking where
Yeah.
they didn't cook as much before.
They had more
I
time because they
They
were
had more
home.
time. Well, they were
That's
forced.
right. They,
Yes,
they were forced to be
exactly,
home.
yeah.
And if you're going to make life interesting, you know, dinner was
Yeah.
something you could use.
Yes, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you're going to give advice to people about cooking who are sort of novices at the game, or maybe not as venturesome as they'd like to be, what advice would you give to people? You guys have been cooking for a long time.
Just don't be scared to try something new.
That's right.
See, all you can do is
Absolutely.
fail at it and try
Yeah.
again.
Try
That's
again.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, look at me. I went from pucks to bread.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
If you can do it.
If I can do it, anybody can do it. And I mean, I tell people all the time. People call me and say, "Well, Darlene, you know, like biscuits. You make such beautiful biscuits, or beautiful bread, or rolls, or Kaisers, or whatever." And say, you know, how do I do that? So what I do is I break down my recipe. Now I had a business 25 years, but it didn't really bother me whether I was going to give out my recipe or not. So I broke it down for them, and so they could have like 2 or 3
Yeah.
bread or rolls or whatever, and tell them try it. I said it's not hard. You just have to take your time. Don't rush it. And during the pandemic, a lot of people
Made
lot of
bread.
A
people-
lot of people
really
got
did.
into
It's
that.
Every time I
amazing.
looked on Facebook, there was another one.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, say that, and I tell them all the time, it looks delicious.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
during the pandemic, one day, Ethel knows this story, I decided I was going to make bread,
Yeah,
which I hadn't made for years. Right?
Yeah.
But I was making bread. Well, I'll make bread. So I got it all together, and then there was a knock at the door, and somebody had brought me a loaf of bread. Oh, that's really nice. So I'll put it in the freezer because I'm gonna make bread.
Bread, yeah.
And I got a phone call, you know, whatever.
Yeah,
Anyway, I got
something.
back to it.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, to make a long story short, by the end of the day, I had 4 loaves of bread that had
Yeah.
been donated to me. Well, that was going to take me a month and a half to eat this. So I was one of the only people during the pandemic who did not
They
make
make
bread.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Well, it got to the point where you weren't able to find yeast if you went into the grocery store.
well, absolutely. And I went with I started out the big cans.
Yeah.
Right? And then now, of course, and there was compressed ones. I don't
Yes.
buy the jars because
No.
it's not feasible for me to buy jars.
No. The compressed
So-
ones are good. The
Yeah.
instant ones.
So I don't use instant.
I use instant.
tradition. I have a hard time with instant. For some reason, it just doesn't turn out like I want it to.
Yeah,
I
I
use
The
made.
tradition is.
You use instant rice.
Well,
Yeah.
so what's the secret?
I use instant now in my gluten-free bread, and
Yeah.
gluten-free bread is very difficult to make.
Yes.
As
yeah.
far as I'm
Tried it.
concerned,
Yeah.
I mean, I have one successful recipe for gluten-free bread,
Yeah.
and you know it tastes and looks really good, and it rises this high, and it's full of air, and it's nice crust, and it's actually perfect as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
because I've tried so many.
Yeah.
But it's
But
not
now
easy to
Cecile's
make.
biscuits today, they were pretty good.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, the instant yeast in that was what it called for.
Yeah, and it's
you
what
know.
you get used to using.
Yeah.
And baking and cooking are different, right?
Yes.
I mean, to
Oh,
my
yeah.
mind,
Oh, yes.
baking
Cooking is easier.
Yeah, baking requires a
Yeah.
certain amount of precision.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, like if you get distracted and you get on the phone.
Yeah.
And you
Things
miss
that-
that salt or your
You miss
sugar
that
or whatever.
moment.
Yeah.
You're-
Or you
yeah.
want to substitute, it
Yeah.
may not work
Yeah.
so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it requires planning. Like my recipe for
Yeah.
that bread, there's a recipe, but and, you know, I've gotten the recipe and I've changed it,
And that's what you do.
and now you know it's what I want it to be.
That's what I
But
did.
My poor husband ate so much terrible pie crust while I was learning. It took me years. It was so bad that he would take the crust off the top, eat the middle, and I mean, you couldn't eat it.
Oh,
Yeah.
It took me years to perfect pie crust.
I never did.
Yeah.
I
Years.
never did perfect a pie crust.
And then I discovered Tender Flake,
Oh.
yeah,
right?
you and my mom.
And I made
Yeah.
them, you know, like in the fall, you buy your apples by the bushel. He would process all the apples. I would do
Yeah.
pie crust on the buy in the freezer, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And now I find that I just can't handle that whole pound of Tender Flake. I'm back to Crisco.
Of course,
Yeah.
But as you were saying, what we were talking about before, people learning how to cook and stuff, I would say everything fresh, nothing processed in your food.
Yes,
try.
exactly.
And we
Yeah.
all seem
Yeah.
to be doing that. Like,
Yeah.
More.
More.
Yeah.
like why would you go to the store and buy a frozen beef stew?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
For a
used
lot of
to.
money.
I confess.
Or
And
a
but
frozen
the young-
hamburger
A
patty.
frozen
Yeah.
hamburger.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
they're
I've
Well,
never,
once the
I've
younger
never
kids
done
do
that.
that.
oh, they're
The
disgusting.
kids now, the faster the better.
Yeah, I
You
don't
take
like
it,
that.
throw it in the
Because
whatever,
they don't
you know,
plan the
package.
night before.
No.
Take
Well,
something out of the freezer
I think
or
too-
whatever. Like,
Yeah.
or,
I start, what I do is I say, while I'm eating supper, what are we going to have tomorrow night for supper?
Oh, yeah.
Eddie bursts out laughing every time. He said, I was waiting for you to say that, right? So I'm
Yeah.
I
always planning.
think if you get in the habit of cooking, but as somebody who did not cook,
Yeah.
I mean, again, you know, I was an undomesticated person, the least domestically inclined person I ever knew. But my kids ate. I mean, I did feed them.
Yeah.
But I was a single mom and I was working full
Yeah.
time, and so I do have to say that I did cut corners,
Yeah.
especially when your kids are little, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
part of what their thing is to protest about anything you do anyway, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
anything you put on the table is gross and disgusting, and it doesn't matter whether it's fresh. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. They're
Yes,
just going to
yeah.
say they don't like it.
Yeah.
So I think for me it was a lot of convenience, and then getting into that habit, and somehow convincing myself. I think also because there's so many cooking shows, it looks like it's something like amazing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And the idea that I had time to do something amazing.
Amazing.
I didn't have time to do anything amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But that actually turns out not to be true.
No.
But I
You
did
can do
know-
amazing.
Yeah,
I've had
can
some
do
of your food.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
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 I
Find
would.
it.
My advice would be, if you're going to prepare a recipe, is to read the recipe thoroughly first,
Make sure you got everything.
and then prepare all your bits and pieces, and have it ready to go as you're cooking.
Then it
Just
doesn't
take your
seem
time.
so.
Just don't
And,
start from.
yeah, just don't go, oh, I'm going to make this, oh, it calls for onions, and you put the onions in the pot. Oh, what else does it call for?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
you know,
can't do
that doesn't work. It's
Yeah.
got to
No.
be,
See, now that took me a while
Yeah.
to learn, and
Yeah.
I'm surprised I didn't know that because I do a lot of handiwork, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I'm a good painter, as some people
yes, I know.
But one of the things that, you know, if you paint, is that it's all in the prep.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the fun part is the actual painting, right?
Yeah.
Like when you get to
Right.
roll the wall, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cooking's a lot the same way, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
if you get all the prep done,
Oh,
yes,
yes,
the
yes.
prep is the
And,
thing.
and then,
then
you
when it
just-
all comes
that's
together,
right.
it's
Yeah.
hilarious, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's magic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
once you've
Yeah.
chopped,
Yeah.
the cooking is pretty simple.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I love to make sushi too,
Yeah.
and I pickle my own ginger.
Do you?
And I've just started pickling daikon and carrots so I can put that in the sushi rolls. But
I'm getting
yeah.
hungry.
Ben's going to do a class on that. I asked him.
Is it?
Just ate.
Yeah.
Oh,
to do
nice.
Sushi. Yeah, I like sushi. Yeah.
Oh, I
And
love
so do
it.
I, as long as there's no raw fish involved.
Oh,
Well,
I
that's the
do
same thing with me.
I
raw fish
can't
is not
swallow
like-
it.
Well, I do enjoy raw
Okay,
fish.
see,
but-
now that's about going out on a limb, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
yeah.
love sushi.
I love
Yeah,
it.
my
Yes,
daughter-in-law
yes, I
will
do
look
too,
for
yeah.
I
that.
tried the
Yeah.
raw
No,
tuna.
she'll
Jerry
go
took me
around
out
looking.
one time. I couldn't swallow it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Never-
he
oh,
made a
I've
Jake's
tried it.
dinner,
Oh.
Jerry again.
Uh-huh.
and he did this peas pudding
In a bag?
Putting it
in a
back.
bag.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And he was just going on and on about this that I had to try it.
You didn't like it?
I swallowed it.
I'm not fussy
That's me
for
with
it
a raw
either,
oyster.
It tasted like, I mean, the flavor was good,
Oh my God, I
Yeah.
love it.
but the texture was like a can of peas that you squash down into
All the
a.
water.
It wasn't green though. It
Like,
wasn't
you know, in
green.
a car,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
crushed.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
It wasn't
Squeeze
green.
all of
It
it
was
out.
fresh.
No, but you like
It
yellow
wasn't
peas.
green peas, was it?
I don't know.
But you can get
No.
split green and you can get split,
Split
yellow.
yeah.
So it wasn't split green, it was split yellow.
Yellow.
Split yellow peas. Yeah,
If
that's
they
what
weren't
we use.
green.
But I still think,
Yeah.
you know, like I think of my grandfather with the mussels. Like if you suggested to him sushi dinner,
Yeah.
he'd probably think you were certifiable.
Wow.
Raw fish. Okay.
Yeah.
Love mussels.
Yeah. Well, listen.
I do too.
Is there anything we should say about food and cooking and
I
recipes?
should show my peas pudding bag.
Oh my goodness,
Yes.
she brought it.
I
A
bought
show
a prop.
and tell.
I bought a prop.
Yeah, that's it.
Look at it.
This was made
Yeah.
by my Aunt Georgine. And you put the peas in, you've washed the peas and you put it in, and you leave about an inch. And then you tie it tight. And I usually tie it onto the end of the handle of my pot so it doesn't sink and burn.
Oh, right,
Uh,
okay.
which
Yeah,
can
I-
sometimes happen. And you put that in there when you put the salt meat in, and you let it cook for
That's
the
what he
whole
did.
time.
That's what he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's clearly not for everybody. Which
Not
is
for
true of
everyone.
many things.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you had my
Yeah.
peas pudding.
I love it.
I love peas pudding.
Yeah.
There's not-
the rest
the only
of the
thing I-
bowl dinner was
The
delicious.
only thing I won't eat is a parsnip. And
Oh,
I don't
love
I
parsnip.
love fried parsnip. Oh my God.
There's no reason.
tried
I like it in
that.
the soup.
I love it.
And some of them, the women at my sewing group, one of them was talking about fried parsnips. She said it never makes it to the table, so she told me how. And I went, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, you and
try
I are on
I
the same page.
actually like the great big parsnips like that.
Yeah, you have it in a
Put them
stew or
on the
your-
barbecue.
Yeah, on the barbecue.
So my-
I've never tried them on the
barbecue.
barbecue.
On the barbecue. My dad used to
Fun.
do this.
Yeah.
And when you could poke them and you knew it was cooked,
Yeah.
you split the burnt, the crust, the skins would all be burnt. You split that right down the middle and put butter on it. Pepper.
Oh, that'd be good. Parsnip.
Sounds very nice.
And you might like parsnip. I taught my husband to
Well,
eat
I had a
parsnip.
cousin who made a parsnip casserole that I did eat that I thought was like I ate it.
Okay.
But my mother used to sneak parsnips into everything, and
Okay.
so
That's why you don't
Back
like
when they
it.
used to be cheap, probably they aren't
Try it
anymore.
mashed with butter and pepper.
Yeah.
I've no. I
No,
think
I
it's like
really-
you and peas pudding.
I don't think
But
there's...
fried parsnip, you parboil them just for a few minutes, drain them off, and then you put butter in the pan and fry them until they crisp and
Crispy a little.
I just put them in
like
soup.
didn't tell
candy,
me
like
to cook
candy.
them.
Yeah.
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 She didn't tell me to cook
Oh no,
them.
that's why you wouldn't cook them in a pan like that. No. You have to.
Well, I had parsnip in
I'll
the
try it
dinner the
again.
other
Yeah.
night. Did you?
What?
Did you have any of those parsnips?
No, I saw the parsnip and
When
I
you
I
avoided it
kept
like
my
the
distance.
plague. I love it.
I know people love parsnips. I don't know why, but yeah. Well, listen. So, is there anything we need to say about recipes or cooking or that we haven't said?
Keep them alive.
Yeah.
Which
Yep.
oh,
all
old
of
recipes.
your family recipes and all that. Keep them alive.
Yes. Yeah.
Pass them down.
Get a
Yeah,
recipe.
bake
Get a
copies.
recipe
Where's the
book
book? Put 'em
going,
in there.
which I'm
That's
going
right.
to do.
Yeah.
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 And keep them for your family because inevitably they're going to be saying, "Oh, I don't know how to make mom's
Yeah.
Yeah,
curried
whatever.
lentils."
Yes, exactly. Yes.
know?
Yeah.
And
Although my kids are good, and they never cooked at home because I was home.
right.
You
When
did
they
it,
were young,
yeah.
and I always cooked. And the first time we went to our son's house for supper, one night he had barbecued ribs and
it's
twice baked
amazing.
potatoes and a beautiful Caesar salad. I forget what they had for dessert. And I'm looking at him. I said, "Scott, this was so good. Why couldn't you do this when you lived at home?"
Well,
He looked
Mom,
at me
you
and said,
wouldn't
"Mom, I
let
didn't
us."
have to."
That's
Yeah.
right. And the
Because
same
I
thing
did it right.
Well, I have to say
Same
this.
thing with our boys. They say
My,
the same
my
thing.
Gordon had a girlfriend, and she was coming to his house, and we raised ducks. So he said, "Oh, I want to make a duck à l'orange," and he made that for his girlfriend on a first date or
Whoa.
something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
It takes
Gordon.
guts.
Now that,
Yeah.
Now
yeah,
that's
or does it
guts,
ever?
right?
Yeah,
Oh.
absolutely.
it's really trying to impress
and
her.
dedicated. He tried to
Yeah.
impress her.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it is true. Now, I think I had one brother who really became a very good cook. I think it's more common for men to cook these days than it was certainly
Oh, yeah.
even in my father's generation.
Yeah.
But I think in my brother's case, I don't know if this is true or not. My mother always maintained that he had to be a good cook because he really liked to eat. And she just couldn't keep it. I mean, he would play hockey, and he was a busy guy who needed to consume a lot of calories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he really had no choice. If he wanted to eat some things, he had to learn how to cook. But it's far more acceptable. Like my son is a perfectly fine cook, and he enjoys it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
my children
my
all
two
cook.
boys are too, and my daughter.
My two
Yeah,
say,
ours
they
too.
love to cook.
Yeah.
The girls they'll prep and do whatever, and they'll say, "You want to cook?
Go
We'll
ahead
do
and
the
cook,
prep
yeah.
and we'll clean up afterwards or
Yeah.
whatever."
Yeah, I mean,
and-
my daughter's a good cook too.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
good
learning.
that they all know
My
how.
daughter-in-laws
They're
are
both
learning,
better
so
cooks
they're
than I
doing
am.
good.
Children, both
Yeah.
of them. Yeah.
But it's nice not to see it sort of so gender divided.
Yeah.
right?
No.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
Well, just recently, my oldest son, his wife, Danielle, she works down the road here, and she called me the other day, and she said, "I have a chicken carcass," and she said, "How can I do chicken noodle soup?" So that was the first that she called me to do that.
Yeah.
But then I wanted to
really
taste
good.
it.
Yeah.
Of course.
And she bottled it, and she said she put it in the freezer. I said, "Okay, the next time you make one, you have to invite us over."
Yeah.
So we'll
The
see.
best compliment I ever got though was my son's a fisherman too. My daughter fishes with her husband, and my husband fishes. And anyway, they were out one day, and it was miserable snow. It was snow falling and rain and cold. And Scott said he came home and he said, "Mom, the only thing that kept me going today was knowing you were going to be home with the wood stove going and a nice hot meal for Dad and I. That's
Yeah.
the only thing I wanted to pack it in
Yeah,
by
it's
9 o'clock in the morning."
Yeah.
But that he knew, so they did appreciate
Yeah,
that
that's
gives me
right.
when you were
Yeah.
home and what you did
Yeah.
for them.
Oh,
absolutely.
absolutely.
They always
Absolutely.
they also
Yeah.
thanked us for making them work hard,
Yeah.
because when
Yeah.
they went out and got jobs, they said,
They
"Thanks
knew
for
it.
making us work."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Good work ethics.
yeah,
So
yeah. And
important.
they're all hard
Yeah.
workers. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, all right. It's been a real pleasure, and I've
enjoyed it.
learned things about food and things about you people,
Mhm.
and so it's been a privilege. I want to
Thank you for
Well,
inviting
Well,
Thank
us.
you.
thank
This
you
was
for
great,
having
yes.
us and for this lovely meal.
Yes,
by
thank
Seal.
you.
Yes.
Oh, it was
That was
delicious.
beautiful.
Yeah, talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
food.
Yeah.
Kudos to the cook.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
absolutely.
Well, we're done.
Okay.
Woo.